I was lying beneath my truck on a quiet Saturday morning when my fingers brushed against something that should not have been there. Something warm, deliberate, and dangerous. For more than 40 years, this ritual had been my anchor to routine. Same hour, same tools, same creak of old metal when I slid under the frame. But that morning, the stillness broke. My hand stopped on the foreign shape. At first I thought it was a rock wedged into the undercarriage, or maybe a tool I had carelessly left behind. But the texture was smooth, almost polished, and nothing about it felt accidental. I reached for the flashlight beside me and angled the beam upward. That was when the glint of a small blinking light answered the question I had not yet formed. A compact black device, no larger than a bar of soap, clung to the steel beam of my truck, with a magnet designed far beyond anything you would find at a hardware store. The LED pulsed a faint red rhythm, steady and patient, as if it were breathing. I touched it again and felt warmth radiating through the casing. Not residual heat from the engine. Not warmth from the early morning air. This heat came from recent activation. Someone had placed it there, recently, purposefully. I did not yank it off. Instinct said that would be foolish. Instead, I remained on the creeper for a long, silent moment, listening to the small clicks of cooling metal, the distant wind brushing through the grass outside the open workshop door. This truck had been mine longer than many friendships. I knew every bolt, every weld, every scar, and this object did not belong. Slowly, methodically, I began documenting. My old phone was always in my coverall pocket. I switched the camera on and took photos from every possible angle, adjusting the flashlight to capture the shape and the serial stamp near the base. I took wide shots too, to show exactly where the device was positioned. I had spent my career as a structural surveyor, recording details with precision. Habit turned instantly into instinct. Once every angle was captured, I pulled a clean cloth from my toolbox, wiped my prints off the casing, then pried the magnet loose. It detached with a soft metallic sigh. I placed it inside a plastic container, sealed the lid, and set it on my workbench. The oil change lay forgotten. Back at my kitchen table, I sat staring at the container. In its dull, clear plastic prison, the device looked harmless, almost disappointingly small. But the warmth I had felt told me everything I needed to know. It was alive, transmitting, observing, which led to the only question that mattered. Who was watching me? I lived alone. No neighbors nearby. No one who cared enough or hated enough to keep tabs on a man my age. I ran through the list of people who had been inside my workshop that week. The feed delivery driver, a young man who barely lifted his eyes from his tablet. My old friend Martin, who had dropped off a borrowed saw and stayed exactly 3 minutes. And my son, Adrian. Adrian had arrived unannounced on Tuesday, cheerful in a way that never matched his eyes. He said he wanted to check the air compressor and the tire pressure. He insisted he would handle it and told me to relax, to go inside and rest my knees. He had stayed in the workshop alone for almost 20 minutes. At the time, I had been touched by the rare gesture. Now that memory felt heavy, misshapen, suspicious. Still, I stopped myself from letting accusation bloom fully. 40 years of surveying had taught me one thing. Assumption without measurement is error. And error gets people hurt. So I made a decision. I would not confront Adrian. I would not call Martin. I would not ask a single question. Instead, I would observe. I would leave the truck untouched in the workshop. I would continue my life as if nothing had happened. I would wait to see who grew anxious when I stopped moving. Because whoever had placed that device expected me to follow a pattern, and the moment I broke their pattern, they would break their silence. And that was when the truth would start to reveal itself. The first 24 hours passed quietly. Too quietly. I kept the truck where it was, untouched, resting on the concrete, as though it were simply waiting for me to resume the oil change. But I did not. I tended the animals, swept the porch, sharpened a few old chisels that had not seen daylight in years. Every movement was intentional, deliberate, slow. If someone was watching my routines, I wanted them to feel the shift. By evening, nothing unusual had happened. No cars appeared on the long dirt road, no unexpected knocks at the door. But silence can be its own signal, the kind that prickles the back of your neck. I went to bed early and slept lightly, waking several times to the faint hum of my refrigerator or the distant hoot of an owl, each time half expecting something to be out of place. It was the next afternoon when the first crack appeared. My phone rang while I was repairing a torn section of fencing. Adrian's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out, but instinct urged me to answer. His voice came through with an easy warmth that felt manufactured, as though he had practiced it beforehand. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in." Checking in was not something Adrian did, not without a reason. I wiped sweat from my brow. "I am doing fine, just fixing some fencing." "Oh, good, good." He paused. "How is the truck running?" There it was. The wrong question, said in the wrong tone at the wrong moment. Not "how are your knees?" or "did you ever finish that oil change?" It was about the truck. "Fine," I replied, allowing a small lie to form. "Though, I think the transmission slipped earlier. Might need to take a look at that." The silence on the line tightened. "Exactly what kind of slipping? Are you sure nothing else is wrong? Did you drive far?" 3 questions in rapid succession, each cutting closer than the last. I felt a chill even though the sun was warm on my shoulders. "Nothing major," I said calmly. "Why are you asking so many questions?" Another pause, then a strained chuckle. "Just making sure you are safe, Dad. Old trucks can be unpredictable." His voice wavered on the word safe. I ended the call shortly after, offering as little as possible, and stared at the phone long after the screen went dark. Adrian never asked that many questions. He never cared about the truck unless he needed to borrow it. Something deeper was moving beneath the surface. The second crack appeared the next morning. I was cleaning out the old feed shed when the phone rang again. Adrian. Twice in 2 days. That had not happened since he was a teenager. His tone was too bright, too eager, too deliberately casual. "Hey, Dad, you at home?" "Where else would I be?" I answered. "Just checking. Thought maybe I could come visit this weekend. Maybe help with the truck." "You sure are interested in that truck lately." The silence that followed felt sharp, like a blade being unsheathed. "Old engines worry me," he said. "I just want to make sure yours is not acting up." I leaned against the shed doorway, watching dust dance in a beam of morning light. His excuses were unraveling. I had not driven the truck since discovering the device, yet he kept circling around questions that only made sense if he expected movement that never happened. After we hung up, I walked back toward the house slowly, each step sinking deeper into unease. My mind replayed old moments. The time Adrian insisted on setting up the new router himself. The afternoon he claimed my laptop was running slow and asked to take it into the workshop to fix it. The week he brought over a new external hard drive as a gift, encouraging me to back up everything. At the time, I thought he was trying to reconnect. Now, those memories lined up too neatly, forming a path I did not want to follow. By late afternoon, I found myself standing in the doorway of my workshop again, staring at the empty spot beneath the truck where the tracker had rested. The room felt different, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I knew I needed more information before I confronted anyone. Experience had taught me that impatience leads to mistakes, and mistakes can be fatal when you do not understand the full design of the threat. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. It hummed to life, slower than usual, the way it often did after Adrian had last worked on it. I stared at the screen, then navigated to the system diagnostics the way Adrian once showed me. I studied processes I recognized, then noticed one I did not. A remote access program quietly running, unnoticed, buried among harmless-looking tasks. My chest tightened. Before I clicked anything, I shut the laptop with deliberate care. If someone was watching my activity, they would know instantly if I tried to expose them. Instead, I retrieved my old backup laptop from the closet, an aging machine that had not touched the internet in 2 years, powered it up, and searched for similar remote access tools. The information I found made my hands tremble. Someone could view my files. Someone could mirror my screen. Someone could watch everything I typed. And suddenly the tracker did not feel like the only violation anymore. It was only one branch of a much larger intrusion. As night settled in, the world outside sank into stillness. But inside me, something had awakened. Suspicion had become certainty. And certainty had grown teeth. There was more at play than a simple tracker, and I was no longer willing to pretend otherwise. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the old house felt amplified. Every brush of wind along the siding seemed to whisper warnings. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of my own breathing, wondering when my home had stopped being a sanctuary and turned into a stage set for someone else's eyes. At 1 a.m, I rose from bed and padded softly to my office, where the faint glow of moonlight outlined the dusty shelves. My hands were steady, but inside me, something cold and sharp was forming. On the desk sat the laptop. Adrian had touched countless times, its smooth surface now looking like a polished trap. I did not turn it on. Instead, I took out a small external boot drive I used to rely on back when survey reports required isolated drafts. I plugged it in and powered the laptop, using the alternate system. At least this way, I could examine its guts without activating whatever hidden tendrils were waiting beneath the normal startup. When the interface loaded, I navigated with slow precision, reading lines of processes, command histories, and system footprints. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Someone had been accessing my documents when I was asleep. Someone had opened my pension statements, legal files, scanned copies of my identification, and old survey contracts I had not looked at in years. Someone had scrolled through my property records and my medical insurance information. Someone had installed the remote access program 6 months ago, and it had been active almost every single night since. And that someone had used my laptop as if it were their own. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the pale light of the screen. It felt as though the house itself had overheard every word, every sigh, every private moment. The walls were no longer walls. They were secrets waiting to collapse. My stomach tightened as I realized something else. The tracker had been placed recently, but the digital intrusion had begun long before that, which meant the tracker was not the beginning. It was an escalation, a tactic taken only when patience was running out. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped at a name I had not called in over 20 years. Cooper Lane, long-haul driver, stubborn as iron, loyal as old rope. A man who never asked questions unless he absolutely had to. We had worked together on coastal inspections long ago, until our lives drifted apart like boats after a storm. I pressed call. Cooper answered with a rough voice shaped by diesel fumes and sleepless nights. "Harold, this better be good. It is 1 a.m. "Coop, I need a favor," I said quietly. "Something I cannot explain yet. But I need something delivered far away. Up north. No questions." He grumbled. But beneath the gravel, I heard concern. "You sound rattled. You are not a man who rattles easy." "I am not," I said, "which is why you should listen. Can you take a small, sealed package with you on your next run across the border?" A long pause. "When do you need it moved?" "Tomorrow morning." Another pause. "Fine. Meet me at the truck yard at 7. And Harold, if this gets me in trouble, you better owe me more than a beer." "I will owe you more than that," I said. And I meant it. The next morning, before dawn had lifted the blue haze off the fields, I drove out to meet him. Cooper stood beside his rig, arms crossed, coffee steaming in his hand. He eyed the small box I handed him, sealed, unmarked, wrapped tightly in plain tape. "What is inside?" he asked. "Something that will make someone very nervous," I replied. He let out a low whistle. "All right then. It will be in another country by noon. I thanked him and drove home, my heart beating with the slow, measured pace of someone waiting for the trap to spring. And spring it did. At 10:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring out. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. By the fifth call, my pulse had settled into a grim certainty. He was watching the tracker. He knew exactly where it should have been. He knew it was no longer under my truck. And worse, he knew I could not possibly have traveled such a distance in such a short time. The sixth call came with a voicemail. His voice cracked around the edges of panic. "Dad, where are you? Call me back. Right now. This is serious." Serious for him, maybe. But for me, it was confirmation. Someone was terrified now that the trail had gone somewhere they did not anticipate. But then something else happened that thickened the air around me. At 11, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the entrance of my property. Lingered a moment, then continued down the road. It did not belong to anyone local. There was no reason for it to be there. I watched, from behind the curtain, motionless. It became clear that Adrian was not the only one who cared whether that tracker moved. Somebody else was paying attention. Somebody who was not calling me. Somebody who did not need to. They were watching their investment disappear into territory they could not reach. And that was when I realized the situation was far more dangerous than I had imagined. Adrian was not acting alone. He was afraid. But he was not the one I should fear most. The dark sedan haunted me long after it disappeared down the road. It had moved too slowly, too deliberately, the way a person traces the outline of something they intend to claim. For the rest of the afternoon, every sound on the property felt sharpened. Every distant engine suddenly suspicious. Even the horses grew restless, pacing the fence line as if they sensed a shift in the air. By evening, I decided I needed clarity about what that device truly was. Guesswork would only get me killed. I drove to a small independent repair shop on the outskirts of town, a place run by a man named Roland, once a gifted mechanic with a talent for anything powered by fuel or wires. He owed me a favor from a job long ago when I helped certify the structural integrity of his newly built workshop. When I showed him the photos of the tracker, he stopped mid-sentence. "Where did you find this?" "Under my truck," I said quietly. He looked at the images again, zooming in on the serial code, the wiring ports, the mounting bracket. His face shifted from curiosity to concern. "This is not a basic tracker, Harold. This thing is military-grade in design, stripped and repurposed. See this port here? That is for engine override. And this one connects to the fuel injection system. Whoever installed it knows exactly what they are doing." My skin prickled. "How does it work?" "In simple terms," he said, slowing his words, "someone with the paired device or the right program can shut your truck off while you are driving, cut the fuel flow, lock the steering hydraulics, even jam your braking response." He tapped the screen. "At highway speeds this would be fatal. Not maybe. Definitely." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Roland leaned back, folding his arms. "Whoever put this on your vehicle was not trying to keep track of your errands. They were preparing for a kill switch. A clean accident. No suspects." I thanked him and stepped out of the workshop, the cold evening air hitting me like a slap. The world tilted slightly as I walked toward my truck. My own son might have wired my death into the bones of the vehicle I trusted most. But the sedan, the calls, the rush. Adrian was terrified now that the device had vanished. Terrified of someone else. I needed more answers. The next morning, I met with my attorney, a meticulous man named Richard, who had handled my contracts and estate papers for years. I handed him a folder full of screenshots, detailing the spyware access logs, and printed copies of the finances I noticed had been reviewed without my permission. He read in silence, his frown deepening with every page. Then, he turned his monitor toward me. "Do you remember authorizing any changes to your property deed?" "Of course not." He clicked open a digital file. "Someone submitted a partial ownership transfer request under your name. It was incomplete, so it did not go through." But whoever tried it had a scanned digital copy of your signature. My mouth went dry. And that is not the worst part, he said softly. 2 weeks ago, someone attempted to secure a private loan using your land as collateral. What kind of loan? $350,000. I stared at him. Who would give that kind of money? Not a bank, he replied. A private lender. A dangerous one. They operate in the shadows. When borrowers fail to pay, they do not file civil suits. They send people. The sedan flashed again in my memory. Slow, deliberate, assessing. Richard folded his hands. If someone used your property without your knowledge and defaulted, these lenders might come here, assuming you are part of the agreement. And if you are not cooperative, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. I felt something inside me harden. My voice trembled, despite my effort to steady it. Who is tied to this loan? Richard hesitated. The name listed was obscured. But there is an attached financial statement. A joint application. It includes your son's partner. My pulse jumped. And my son? There was another hesitation. I saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. Yes. Adrian signed as guarantor. The room seemed to pull away from me for a moment. The walls stretched, the light dimmed, and something inside my chest sank. I pressed my palms against my knees to stop them from trembling. Richard continued quietly. If they do not repay in full within the next 48 hours, they will come here. And they will not care who is at fault. So the tracker, the digital intrusions, the sudden panic. Adrian was not trying to protect me. He was trying to monitor the asset these lenders believed belonged to him. They were watching the ranch, watching my routines, waiting for the moment the debt came due. And if I died before they arrived, the property transfer would move faster, cleaner, uncontested. Death was not collateral damage. It was the plan. As I stood up to leave, Richard stopped me. Harold, you need to call the police. Maybe even federal authorities. This is not just financial misconduct. This is preparation for homicide. I stepped into the cold air outside his office and looked up at the sky as clouds thickened overhead. The wind had picked up, rattling the dry leaves scattered across the pavement. For a long moment, I did not move. The truth had finally aligned, each piece clicking into place with brutal clarity. Adrian was drowning in debt. His partner was tied to dangerous lenders. My land was their lifeline. And someone out there was already watching, waiting, ready to force payment in blood. The web was tightening fast, and I had 48 hours before it closed around me. I drove home with the numbness of someone moving through someone else's life. The sky had darkened into a heavy gray curtain that pressed low over the hills, as if the world itself were preparing for a storm. The wind rattled the empty feeders, and the horses stood still, ears pointed toward the road as though they sensed what was coming long before I fully did. Inside the house, the stillness felt oppressive, like I had stepped into a room that no longer belonged to me. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and leaned both hands on the kitchen counter until the shaking in my fingers settled. $350,000. A kill switch device. A forged property transfer. A loan tied to violent men. And 48 hours on the clock. Running would have been easy. I had friends in distant states. I had enough retirement to disappear. But, as I stood in the dim light of my kitchen, I realized something with startling clarity. If I ran, the land that held decades of memories would be taken. My home would be taken. My life, everything I built, would dissolve into the hands of people who saw me as an obstacle, not a human being. No, I would not run. I would fight. I walked to my office, opened a drawer, and pulled out the notebook where I had once drafted inspection notes. I turned to a blank page and wrote a single word across the top: control. If they wanted control, I would take it back. The plan formed slowly, painfully, like stitching a wound shut without anesthetic. First, I gathered the tools. I drove to a supply store several towns away where no one knew me. I paid cash for 4 small security cameras, each no larger than a hummingbird. They had no cloud connections, no online accounts, nothing traceable. Just local storage linked to a device only I would access. Then I bought a simple laptop, inexpensive but sealed, untouched by anyone else. No updates, no syncing, a clean slate. By noon, I returned home and began installing the cameras. One behind the living room bookcase, its lens peeking through a gap between volumes. Another inside the kitchen wall clock, disguised among gears and shadows. The third mounted inside a decorative wooden birdhouse facing the front porch, and the fourth hidden in my office behind a framed photograph of my late wife, angled carefully to capture anyone sitting in the chair across from mine. As each camera blinked to life, I felt something inside me settle. I was no longer the watched. I was the watcher. Next came the phone calls. The first was to an old acquaintance, a private legal consultant named Rowan, who had once lectured me on evidence gathering and state consent laws. When I explained the situation in measured detail, he responded with the quiet seriousness of a man who had seen the worst of human desperation. "You need verbal confirmation," he said. 3 elements. That the device was installed by them, that they knew its potential danger, and that they used or planned to use your property without your permission. I wrote the points down, my hand steady for the first time all day. The second call was far harder. It was the number given to me by someone who had once handled crime scene analysis for government agencies. A federal hotline that rarely entertained cases from civilians unless the circumstances were extraordinary. When the operator transferred me, an agent with a calm voice introduced herself simply as Agent Keller. She listened as I recited the timeline. The tracker, the forged documents, the loan, the ticking deadline. When I finished, the line stayed silent long enough for me to hear my own breath echo back. "Mr. Cross," she finally said, "this falls under multiple federal jurisdictions. If you can gather a recorded admission, we can intervene immediately. But intervention requires justification, evidence, proof of intent. I will have it tomorrow morning," I said. "My son is coming." She hesitated. "Sir, this is dangerous. If they sense anything, they may act before help arrives." I looked out the window toward the road where the sedan had passed the day before. "I understand. Can you have agents positioned nearby?" "2, she said. "Concealed. Close enough to intervene within seconds. But you must not escalate. You must let the truth surface naturally. Do you understand the risk?" "I do." She paused again. The weight of her next words settled into me like lead. "We will be there at 9 in the morning. Make sure the doors are unlocked. Make sure you stay in sight. And whatever happens, do not try to protect them. Protect yourself." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The house hummed lightly with the hidden cameras, their small red indicators pulsing like distant stars. I thought about Adrian, the boy who used to run through the fields with a stick pretending it was a sword, who cried the day his dog died, who once clung to my hand in fear of losing me, and now he might try to kill me to save himself. Grief and resolve tangled within me, twisting tight. At 6 in the evening, as the last light faded behind the trees, I picked up the phone and dialed Adrian. He answered on the second ring, breath unsteady. "Dad, I have been trying to reach you. We need to talk." "We will," I said. "Tomorrow. 9 in the morning. Come alone." There was a pause, then a trembling exhale. "Okay, I will be there." I ended the call, slid the phone onto the table, and exhaled a breath that felt like it had been locked inside me for weeks. Tomorrow, the truth would come into the light, and I would be ready. Morning arrived too quietly. The kind of quiet that makes the air feel staged. Even the birds outside seemed hesitant to sing, as if they sensed the shift in the house. The hidden eyes watching from behind books, clocks, and picture frames. I had barely slept, but exhaustion sharpened me, instead of dulling me. Every step, every breath, carried purpose. At 8:30, Agent Keller sent a simple message. In position, the 2 agents were already inside the house, tucked away in the laundry room behind a half-closed door, invisible unless someone knew where to look. Their unmarked vehicle sat far down the road, hidden among trees. The cameras I had installed the day before were already recording, each feed quietly streaming to the new laptop on my desk. All that remained was for me to wait. At 8:52, gravel crackled under tires. I stood at the kitchen counter, steadying myself. The sound drew closer, slower, hesitant. Then the engine cut off. A car door shut. Another. Footsteps approached the front porch. Adrian had not come alone. Through the window, I saw him standing there, shoulders stiff, jaw tight. Beside him was Leela, the woman who had entered his life 2 years earlier and over time had narrowed his world until I barely recognized him. Her eyes were sharp, alert, scanning my property like someone assessing the value of merchandise. I opened the door but did not greet them with warmth. I simply stepped aside. Adrian entered first, avoiding my gaze. Leela followed without waiting for an invitation, her chin lifted, her handbag clutched close to her ribs as if she were concealing something inside. We settled in the living room, the same room where my wife and I had once spent evenings reading or watching storms roll in. Now it felt like an interrogation chamber. Adrian sat on the sofa, elbows on his knees, fingers fidgeting. Lila sat upright beside him, expression carved from cold marble. I took the chair across from them, angling my body so the hidden camera in the bookcase would catch every detail. "Dad," Adrian began, "we just came to talk. We can work this out. Whatever you think is happening, you are misunderstanding." I let the lie settle in the air like smoke. Then I spoke. "I found something under my truck." Adrian's face blanched. Lila's eyes snapped sharply toward him before flicking back to me. "Something you installed." "Dad, no," he whispered, his hands trembling. "I can explain." I leaned forward. A tracker, professionally mounted, still warm when I touched it. And now, it is halfway across another country. Lila's composure cracked. "What do you mean?" I met her gaze. "I mailed it to a friend. He delivered it across the border. It is gone." Adrian's heart sank into his posture. His shoulders drooped. His mouth opened but no sound came. I continued. "It is interesting how your phone started ringing the moment it moved." Leela glared at him with such fury that he shrank inward. "Did you track it? You told me it only sent location updates once a day." Her slip was the confirmation I needed. I shifted my focus to Adrian. "You installed it. Why?" Adrian crumbled like wet paper. "Dad, please, we had no choice. We were trying to fix things. We were scared. You were not supposed to find it." Lila said, "It was only for your safety." "For my safety," with a kill switch wired into it. Adrian's eyes widened. "A kill what?" Lila's lips tightened, betraying guilt. "It is just a tracker," she snapped. "Do not exaggerate." "No," I said calmly. The mechanic analyzed it. Fuel cut off. Steering lock. Full override. That device could kill me on the highway. Adrian turned to Lila, eyes filled with betrayal. "You told me it was harmless. You said it would just show where he was." She hissed under her breath. "You talk too much." Adrian buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. "Oh God, oh God." I let a moment pass, then spoke again. "You accessed my computer. You scanned my financial documents. You tried to transfer partial ownership of this land. You applied for a loan in my name." Adrian looked up, tears streaming. "I was desperate. We owed money. They threatened us. They threatened me. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I did not know about the kill switch." Lila shot him a murderous glance. "Stop talking." I pressed on. "You both used my property as collateral. Without my consent, you forged my signature. And when the deadline approached, you installed a device that could make my death look like an accident." "That is a lie," Lila snapped. "You have no proof." I lifted my phone. "I have photos. I have logs. I have forged documents. And I have both your voices right now." She froze. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the recording. Adrian's breathing came fast and shallow. "Dad, please," he whispered, reaching out with shaking hands. "I never wanted this. I was trying to fix the problem before it reached you. I thought if we could repay the loan, no one would ever know. So you decided to risk my life instead of asking for help." He broke completely. His sobs filled the room, raw and pathetic, the sound of a man collapsing under the weight of his own choices. And then I spoke the words that ended everything. "Agent Keller, I believe you have heard enough." The laundry room door opened with a soft click. 2 agents stepped into view, badges raised. Lila shot to her feet. "What is this? You cannot do this. Tell them, Adrian. Tell them. You did not mean it." Adrian sat motionless, staring at the floor, tears dripping onto his hands. The agents moved swiftly. "Adrian Cross, Leela Carter, you are under arrest for attempted fraud, financial exploitation, unauthorized surveillance, and attempted homicide." Handcuffs clicked shut. Leela screamed curses, fighting against the agents. Adrian did not resist. He looked at me once, a broken plea in his eyes. "Dad, please." I said nothing. They led them out into the sunlight. The door closed behind them, leaving an echoing silence in their place. For the first time in weeks, the house was truly still. But stillness does not always bring peace. Sometimes it brings the weight of everything that has just shattered. The days that followed felt strangely muted, as though the world had been wrapped in cotton. The sound of the agents' footsteps echoing down my porch lingered long after they were gone. The sight of Adrian, hunched and trembling in handcuffs, replayed in my mind every time I closed my eyes. And yet beneath the grief, beneath the shock, there was something else. A quiet, steady certainty. I had survived. But survival does not come without cost. The federal investigation moved quickly. Agent Keller met with me twice in the following days, gathering evidence, asking clarifying questions, assuring me that the case was strong. The forged documents, the digital intrusions, the tracker itself, and the recorded confessions created a web of proof impossible to refute. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom and watched as Adrian shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His hair had lost its shape, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. Lila was brought in beside him, chin raised in defiance even now, though the tremble in her jaw betrayed the fear she refused to show. When the charges were read, Adrian did not look at me. Lila glared as though I personally had engineered her ruin. The verdict came down in winter. Adrian accepted a plea deal, his cooperation with the investigation reducing his sentence. He received 5 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release. Leela fought every accusation, denying involvement, blaming Adrian, blaming me, blaming the world. The jury needed only 2 hours to convict her. She received 7 years. I did not stay to watch her taken away. Her hatred was a poison I refused to swallow. After sentencing, I walked out into the cold air. Snow had begun falling, quiet and slow, covering the courthouse steps in a thin white veil. The world looked peaceful, indifferent to the suffering within its walls. I stood there a long time, letting the cold clear my thoughts. Winter deepened, days shortened, nights stretched long and heavy. The ranch, once a living place full of movement and noise, became a landscape of memories. I repaired fences by myself. I ate meals at the kitchen table alone. I drank morning coffee in silence. I read by the fireplace sometimes, but even the crackling wood felt too loud. Loneliness has a way of sneaking into the smallest corners of a house. You feel it when you reach for a second plate out of habit, when you expect a voice to answer yours, when you see the shadow of who your child used to be long before life hardened them into someone unrecognizable. 2 months into the quiet, a letter arrived. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "Dad," it began, "I do not expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I am trying to understand what I became." I folded the letter and locked it in my desk without finishing it. I was not ready. By February, the investigation into the lenders expanded. Dozens of arrests were made across the region. The men who had scouted my property were among them. Agent Keller visited one last time to inform me the danger was gone. Gone for them, maybe. But pieces of danger remained in me. In early spring, I drove to a rescue center and adopted an older dog, a mottled shepherd mix named Flint. He followed me everywhere, slept at my feet, nudged my hand when nightmares woke me. Having another heartbeat in the house softened the edges of the silence. I rebuilt routines slowly, repaired the barn roof, planted early vegetables, took long walks past the tree line. The land felt different now, like soil reclaimed after a wildfire. Scorched, but capable of new growth. Adrian wrote 4 more letters. I kept each one, unopened, not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but because forgiveness is not a switch to be flipped. It is something that must grow in its own time, and some winters are longer than others. Spring arrived cautiously, as though unsure it was welcome. The snow receded in thin patches, revealing the dark soil beneath, and the first timid blades of grass pushed upward through the cold earth. I found myself sitting on the porch most mornings with Flint at my feet, watching the land thaw, feeling something inside me thaw with it. Life, even after devastation, insists on moving forward. The ranch no longer felt like a battleground. It felt wounded, yes, but in the way a body heals after surgery, stitched, aching, yet undeniably alive. I began tending to it as if tending to myself, mending the broken parts, strengthening the weak ones, clearing away what no longer served a purpose. I joined a local elder support group at the suggestion of Agent Keller. At first, I went only to listen, not to speak. But as I listened to story after story, assets drained by relatives, manipulations disguised as kindness, signatures forged by people once loved, I realized that my tragedy was not an anomaly. It was a pattern carried quietly by too many. One afternoon, a man in the group approached me. He was trembling, holding documents in his hands. "My daughter keeps asking me to sign things," he whispered. "I do not understand them, but I am afraid to say no." His fear mirrored mine from months before, so I sat with him for nearly an hour, reviewing each document, explaining what to watch for. When he left, he gripped my shoulder with a strength that surprised us both. That was the beginning. Soon, I found myself giving talks at community centers, explaining warning signs, showing people how to secure their devices, how to store documents safely, how to sense when love becomes leverage. Each time I spoke, a small part of me healed. Survival felt less like a solitary victory and more like a tool I could place in someone else's hands. One evening, after a long meeting, I returned home to find a new letter from Adrian. His handwriting had changed. It was steadier, less frantic, shaped by the patience of someone who had been forced to stop running. "Dad," it read, "I know I cannot undo what I did, but I hope one day we can talk. Not as father and son, but as two people trying to understand their own brokenness." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it gently and set it beside the others. Forgiveness is not a door that opens all at once. It is more like a field that needs time to thaw, rain to soften it, sunlight to coax life back into it. Maybe someday I will write him back. Maybe someday he will sit on this porch beside me again, older, humbled, wiser. But not yet. Flint nudged my hand, sensing the shift in my thoughts, and I scratched behind his ears as the sun sank beyond the tree line. The sky blazed orange and red, as if the world were offering a quiet apology for all the darkness it had allowed. In that moment, I understood something simple and profound. Survival is not merely the act of staying alive. It is the choice to keep living. What happened to me broke something fundamental in my understanding of family, trust, and love. Yet, it also rebuilt something deeper. An understanding that self-preservation is not selfishness. It is responsibility. And boundaries are not walls. They are lifelines. I used to believe that blood was unbreakable, but I learned that love without accountability becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. The people closest to us can harm us not because they are evil, but because fear and desperation turn them into versions of themselves they do not recognize. My wife once told me, long before illness took her, that wisdom was earned only through storms. I never understood that fully until now. The storm nearly took everything from me, but I weathered it. And on the other side, I found clarity, resilience, and a purpose I did not know I still carried. Tonight, as I sit on my porch with my dog beside me and the last light softening over the land I fought to keep, I realize something with complete certainty. This is my life, my home, my peace. And I am still here to live it.